Hello Yu-Gi-Oh players and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJB0. So, a few days ago, I'm a little late to this game, I was going to make this video, but I don't know if you can see in this light or whatever, I've been busy mutilating my hands. So it is high time that I discuss the January 2014 ban list, which was leaked, well not really leaked, it was released on Friday. And it has had actually some pretty positive response. The general consensus about this ban list is it did what it needed to do to dragons, and it left enough of the tier 2 intact that it's going to make for a relatively diverse format, which people tend to really like. So this video is going to be kind of half and half, a little more like a third and 2/3. I'm going to start off by discussing the ban list itself, and then I'm going to move more to focusing for the rest of the video, which is probably going to be the majority, on what the top tier and the meta will look like post-January 2014. So why don't I get started on discussing the ban list itself. So first, there was generally the consensus that this is a very good ban list. Like I said, it did exactly what it needed to do to Dragon Rulers. It did exactly what I predicted it would do to Dragon Rulers also, although like I said in my video, Konami does tend to throw the book at decks it doesn't like, which it doesn't like Dragon Rulers, frankly, because it's losing them a ton of money. So they were a little harsher than I expected them to be, but they hit all the cards that I thought they were going to hit. So speaking of my video, it seems I was a little overzealous in my attempts to hit the tier 2. Apparently Konami does not see many of the decks that I thought of as profit threats as being profit threats, which I think they might regret coming May, but we'll have to see. May will show us whether or not I was right about those things in the long run. But back to the ban list itself, first off, taking down Dragon Ravine, and taking down Return, Sixth Sense, all good things. I'm sorry, Dragoonity players. You guys got hit by proxy, and I don't really like playing against Dragoonities or playing Dragoonities in the first place. They're an extremely linear deck. And once again, Konami didn't get anything out of keeping them in the game, except for, I suppose, the Vajrayana reprint, which I guess they just kind of totally gave up on. They did not hit the tier 2 much, but they absolutely hit the troll decks a lot. They give the big middle finger to self-destruct button decks, which is good. Nothing good came out of self-destruct button being in the game. Konami really doesn't like ties. They really muddle up the tournament process. They make matches take frickin' forever, and a card that's only meant to tie games, it's just bad for the game. And you know that if a person is playing that card in their deck, most likely they're playing the deck in order to play that card, in order to keep tying until the off chance that they win one of their games. It was just really bad for the game. The same goes for what they limited, which was Final Countdown, along with, of course, the main Dragon Rulers. Final Countdown, nobody is sad to see Final Countdown go. And then Magician of Faith came back. That's another thing. A few responses to this happened. There are the people who are freaking out because it got brought back instead of, Stratos, Zen, Mighty, Trishula, Pot of Greed. I don't know. The people out there who are in favor of certain things coming back off the ban list are a wee bit crazy. Anyway, and then there are the people who are freaking the heck out about Magician of Faith being back in the game. They're like, oh, you'll be able to recycle your broken spells, and spellbooks will be the best thing in the world. And then there are the sensible people who are like, okay, so first off, this card's a flip effect, and this card was big back in, I don't know, 2005, maybe. Probably before that, actually. Anyway, back when flip effects actually did something. But I don't know if these people have noticed flip effects are slow and we have moved on to a much faster game. Even in our slowest formats, we are now much faster than we were back in the Go Control days. And the other thing about Magician of Faith is the fact that even though her ability to bring back spells is really powerful, we don't really have the kinds of broken spells that they did back in the days, of course, Goat Control. Back when, you could bring back Confiscation, or you could bring back Delinquent Duo, or Snatch Steal. There were just a ton of cards back then that, you really didn't want the average player to have access to twice. But we don't really have that. The average deck uses, I don't know, Dark Hole, or Duality, or if you run out of MSTs. There are certain decks that can gain a significant benefit, and spellbooks are definitely one of them, but in all reality, I don't think that Magician of Faith is going to do anything to the game at 1. And then, of course, there are the people who are freaking out because Magician of Faith came back and Bestiari wasn't semi-limited, which, I don't really care about about Bestiari. I think that it could come back and nothing would really change. I don't think it absolutely needs to. But the things that did come back to 2, I am really in favor of. I've been saying that Lone Fire should come back to 2 ever since they banned Glow Up Bulb. Because without Glow Up Bulb in the game, Lone Fire at 2 isn't really that much of an issue. And now Konami actually has some skin in the game when it comes to Lone Fire and getting some profit out of decks like Shinra and the Plant Princesses, or the Flower Princesses, I suppose is what they're calling them now. Anyway, so now that there's actually some profit to be gained, Lone Fire is back at 2. I really like Lone Fire. I am glad that it is at 2. I think it's a really good card, but it is in support of decks that tend to take a lot of skill and are only really as powerful as the players who are using them. That's what Plant Synchro strikes me as being. I mean, with the exception of back in the Karakuri Machina Plant days, where you could just OTK like that. So I think Lone Fire back to 2 is good. Oh, and especially with Debris back at 1, I think Lone Fire at 2 is okay. Debris kind of needed to go. It's an abusable card. I really like it, but I realize that's just because I really like Black Rose, and I think the ability to one-card Black Rose is a wee bit overpowered. So I think Debris at 1 is absolutely fine. And of course, Chaos Sorcerer back at 2 is one of many things on this list that appear to be catered toward improving the lot of Chaos Agent players. But I really like it. I think that Chaos decks could have used a little bit of the boost, and it wasn't really doing a whole lot at 1. And Konami is definitely going to be marketing the Lightsworn deck in the near future, and one of the things people like to do with Lightsworns is put in Chaos Engines and make it Twilight, which I am absolutely fine with, and of course Konami has a wee bit of money to make out of it. So I'm not particularly surprised. Speaking of Chaos Agents getting support, Tour Guide back to 3. That's one of the things that I think is debatable as to whether this deck or this list is any good. Is the Tour Guide, I don't know how many of you guys remember Tour Guide at 3. That was only 2 years ago. Tour Guide at 3 kind of sucked ass. It's not necessarily because it was really that bad for the game. It's just because it really homogenized the playstyle of decks. It gave a huge boost to Dark Worlds, which may see an increase in play this format. They're still pretty easy to take out with the card pool we have available. But they gave a huge boost to Dark Worlds. It was basically half the engine in Dino Rabbit. It's just an extremely powerful card. But I think at the time the big issue was Sangan. I think that Sangan, that was the other card that people wanted to bring back to 1. Anyway, Sangan was the reason why that card was broken, because you could summon the Sangan, you could sit on it, and you could Simon He's Agent deck was a great example. Like, he would tribute the Sangan to steal his wind-up playing opponent's Zen Mighty when they summoned it, and then he'd get his Search for Earth with the Sangan. They couldn't make their play for a turn. It was just, Sangan was the really big problem for Tour Guide, so I actually think the Tour Guide back to 3 is A-okay, unless, of course, we see a significant uprising of Dark World players, which I don't think is actually that likely. And then the other big thing that we need to discuss is Mizuki and Plague Spreader to 3. I think Plague Spreader to 3 is absolutely fine. Mizuki to 3 is a little bit questionable since it's such a ridiculously good card, and I think that Konami is trying to push some profit through vampires, which those zombies are definitely getting support. I'm not sure if vampires are the way to go when it comes to giving support to zombies, because I don't know if you guys have been following this pattern. All of the decks that have come out recently during the Dragon format um, have been making some appearance in high-level play. I mean, let's see, Bujin players have been topping, Noble Knight players have been topping. I mean, you haven't seen a substantial number of Ghost Trick players out there, but the point still stands. And Vampires, even though they were given an exclusive that's very, very good, haven't really seen that kind of play. So I think that Vampires are, and zombies in general, are just kind of waiting in the sidelines for something good to come their way. Possibly that was Mizuki and Plague Spreader to 3, but I kind of doubt it. In general, I think we're going to see a much larger amount of the kind of zombie OTK decks that you use with like Lavalval Chain and stuff. So that's kind of my analysis of the ban list and its effect on the state of the game. The really big question, though, is what is the meta going to look like after January? And I think, well, I suppose I can just discuss that now. So the two big front runners that are coming out of the woodwork that people are really into are, first off, Bujins. Now, Bujins are going to be the big deck to beat this format. They just keep getting more and more broken support through things like Peacock and that one card, the Decisive Battle. They're just getting a ton of broken support, and I think after Legacy of the Valiant, I think Bujins are going to start dominating then. But Bujins are a stun deck, and they need an aggro deck to beat them, and the aggro deck that people are really getting into right now is Mermails. Mermails got very little touch from them on the ban list. They lost some substantial consistency in the form of Tidal and Sacred Sword of 7 stars, but all in all, their engine stayed intact, and they're a really powerful deck. I'm going to make a Holy Nuts video about them later. And they're a very consistent deck, they're a very powerful deck, and they are definitely a contender to take down Bujins. Because the thing about stun decks is when they're playing against big aggro decks, that even as they're just spamming out big monsters, they gain more cards and more resources to use, similar to Mermails. Is just that a stun deck can't keep up with that pace, and Bujins will not be able to keep up with the pace of Mermails. And I think that Mermails are going to see some substantial play earlier on in the format, but I think that you're going to see them kind of fade away into the background very slowly. We still haven't seen a release date for the Lightsworn support that's coming out, so I don't know when that's going to be a thing, but if it does, before, of course, the May format, I think that Lightsworns are going to see basically instant tier 1 play. The deck that I think that people are there are two decks that I think that people are really ignoring too much. And those are Constellars and Karakuri Girgia. We've seen Karakuri Girgia and Constellar both sneaking up on the meta in the last format. Recently, Karakuri Girgia has been seeing a lot of publicity because it's actually a really cheap deck to make now, aside from like Dragasac and Big Eye, but Big Eye's getting a reprint. So it's really popular, but it's also extremely aggro, and its OTK is powerful, and not to mention the fact that it has some follow-up plays even after it does the OTK. The deck is definitely going to see tier 1 play. I think it's possible that it could outstrip Mermails later on in the format, especially if and when they get their extra support. But I think they're a big Constellar contender, and Constellar, the card that I had my interesting, or the deck that I had my interesting Freudian slip with right there, is the other big thing that we need to look out for. I've said before when I was talking about Sean McCabe's top Constellar deck at ARG Circus Columbus that Constellars are really, they're extremely underrated by players right now. In order to start winning, all they really have to do is clear your field presence and put a Pleiades on the board, and they basically got control of the game from there, because they use their like Fiendish Chains, they can bring their Fiendish Chains back with their Pleiades, they can control the board, and when And they don't even have to use their Pleiades effect until the 11th hour, at which point they can just bounce your stuff back, and eventually they'll run out of material, and then you can just M7 it, which, by the way, they got 2 more of. They can just put a Pleiades back on the board with Sombre and Kaus. They're just a very, very good deck. They're very stun-like. They are also a good contender for taking down Boojins, but I think Boojins, since we're already comparing everything to Boojins are definitely going to be the big deck of the format. 2 other decks that we really need to look out for are Blackwings, which seem to excel in slow formats, especially now that they have their triple Whirlwind. I'm not at all surprised that they didn't bring Gale back to 2, because 2 Gale plus 3 Whirlwind equals cray cray. But I think the problem with Blackwings is that they probably cannot keep up with Boojins. They do have their own version of Crane and Kalut, but the thing is, in the process of getting Kalut, they don't also set up other plays like Boojins do. So I think the Blackwings are going to struggle in the Boojin matchup. I think that 4-Axis Fire Fist got its 3rd tanky back, which might also help Constellars, although I don't think they ever run more than 2 tanky. 4-Axis Fire Fist is an extremely consistent deck. That's the word I'm looking for. They can often keep up pace with other decks like Dragon Rulers. They always win the side deck game. There's very little that you can really successfully side against Fire Fist, except maybe like Macro, Banisher of the Radiant, stuff like that. But that's all easy stuff for that deck to take down. So 4-Axis is definitely something to look out for. It's definitely going to see, if not tier 1 play, probably tier 2 play. We're going to see a lot of Blackwings and what are they called? 4-Axis Fire Fist in the represented in tier 2. And then the final deck that I kind of want to mention is Inzectors. I'm going to make a Holy Nuts video about them later, but one of the great things about Inzectors is they can run just a ton of side deck cards against players, especially against Boojins. And once Inzectors put a Hornet in the graveyard, they can basically pressure any deck into a loss. But really, I think the big decks to look out for are Karakuri Girgia, Constellar, Boojins, and Mermails. And I think that we're going to see much more Mermail play than the other ones in the early parts of the format. But once Legacy of the Valiant comes out, we're definitely going to have to contend with a lot of Boojins. So that's my analysis of the January 2014 ban list. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. And then subscribe for more silver chains and decks and analysis and discussion and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Meanwhile, thank you guys for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I am your host, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See you guys.